Hello. Today we will look at a few reflections uh, which are relevant for a person's life based on three poems from the first year pre university English course book called Reflections of Karnataka State. Uh, the first poem is uh, The Schoolboy by the poet William Blake. And William Blake was a romantic poet, and he deals with, in this poem, the aspect of education, right from school days and the relevance of that education to the end of life. That's what he deals with in this poem. So, The Schoolboy by the romantic poet William Blake. It says, I love to rise in a summer morn when the birds sing on every tree. The distant huntsman winds his horn, and the skylark sings with me. Oh, what sweet company. So, the speaker in the poem is a school child. I, in the first line of the poem, refers to the school child. So, it says that it loves to rise on a summer morning. Morn is morning, when the birds are singing on every tree around the cottage in which the boy lives. And in the distance, there's a huntsman who is hunting a fox or a rabbit, and he's winding his horn. He's blowing into his horn to scare the rabbit or fox out of its hiding. And this sound of the huntsman's horn is carried over from the distance to the schoolboy. And there's also the skylark. The skylark is a bird which sings at daybreak. So the skylark sings with the schoolboy. That is, the schoolboy also feels like singing when he wakes up and he hears the sounds of the birds and the sound of the huntsman's horn in the distance. So he feels very happy when he wakes up in the middle of nature, and he calls these sounds sweet company. So the child is naturally very happy in the midst of nature. It's very happy to feel the fresh air, to breathe the fresh air, to hear the song of the birds and the sounds of the morning. In the next stanza, the poet continues, but to go to school on a summer morn, oh, it drives all joy away. Under a cruel eye outworn, the little ones spend the day in sighing and dismay. So the second stanza begins with the word but. So when something begins with the word but, it means what follows the word is the opposite of what precedes it. So in the preceding part, the schoolboy is happy, but in the second stanza, we're told that the thought of going to school on a summer morning drives away all the joy from its mind because it has to sit under a cruel eye of one. It has to sit under the cruel eye of an old schoolmaster who's worn out with his teaching, and his friends, the little ones, spend the day in sighing and dismay. So here we're told about the cruelty associated with school life. The child is naturally very happy, it's born happy, but when the artificial process of education begins at a very early age, then all the happiness is is taken away because in the school the methods of education are very severe and cruel. The child is afraid to go to the school. The child is frightened of the old schoolmaster, and he and his friends spend the day by in sighing. Sighing is a soft expulsion of breath when we are feeling very weighed down by worry. So the schoolboy spends its day in sighing and dismay. Dismay is discouragement. So we learn that the methods of education are very severe, and in fact they should be made in a spirit of play. That is what ideally the methods of education should involve a lot of play, not only physical play, but also play with words, play with writing, play with the subjects. So, uh, next in the third stanza, the poet says, then at times I drooping sit and spend many an odd anxious hour, nor in my book can I take delight, nor sit in learning's power, worn through with the dreary shower. So, the poet says that when the schoolboy enters a classroom, he sits drooping. His drooping means his back is bent, his shoulders are bent, his arms are bent, and he's looking down at the ground in a spirit of discouragement. And he spends many worried hours, uh, and he simply cannot take delight in his book. So we learn that for a child to be truly interested in something, to take delight in his books, the method of instruction should involve an element of play. So, playing is what comes naturally to the child. So, it cannot take delight in its books under the severe methods of education, instruction given in the classroom, and it cannot sit in learning's bower. A bower is a group of trees under which classes were uh, held traditionally. It cannot sit in the classroom nowadays because the classroom is worn through with a dreary shower of words, scoldings, beratings, and so on and so forth by the teacher to the student when he doesn't understand, or even he cannot answer a question, or when he doesn't do his homework. So the child simply cannot be happy while it's learning. So how can the bird that is born for joy continues a while sit in a cage and sing? How can a child, when fears annoy, but droop his tender wing and forget his youthful spring? So the poet asks a question, he makes a comparison between a bird that is born to fly freely in the sky and the school child. A bird is born to fly freely in the sky, but it cannot sit in a cage and sing happily. So, similarly, when fears grip its mind, when when it's afraid of the school teacher, when it's afraid of the parents, uh, the poet asks, what other option does a school child have than to droop his tender wing? There's no other option but to bend its arms, bend its back, bend its head, and forget the spring, forget the happiness that it is born with. So, the spring of the child can also mean the spring in the step. So the child shuffles to school, shuffles back to home, and it doesn't sing and dance as should be the case for a person at its age. So when we're very young, we're naturally full of energy and we want to jump and play and sing and be happy and laugh. But under the severe methods of instruction given in the school, every iota of happiness is taken away and the child has to be buried in his books and become a bookworm. Oh, father and mother, continues the poet, if buds are nipped and blossoms blown away, and if the tender plants are stripped of their joy in the springing day by sorrow and care's dismay, how shall the summer arise in joy, or the summer's fruit appear? How shall we gather what griefs destroy, or bless the mellowing year, when the blasts of winter appear? So, in the final two stanzas of the poem, the poet makes an appeal to the parents as well, and he says, if the flower buds, that is, flower in its initial stages, is nipped, it is taken between the forefinger and the thumb and squeezed, its buds are nipped, and the blossoms, that is, the tender minds of the children, are blown away in a storm of words, and if the tender plants are stripped of their joy in the springing day. Tender plants, of course, refers to the minds of the children. And the minds of the children are stripped of their joy. Their joy is removed from the minds of the children and replaced by sorrow and care. Care means worry or anxiety. Dismay means fear and fear of discouragement. So, if these are the results of the methods of instruction, the poet asks in the final stanza, how shall the summer arise in joy? How so in the final stanza of the poem, the poet makes a comparison between the four seasons and the four stages of life. The four seasons are summer, spring, summer, autumn, and winter. Spring, summer, autumn, and winter are the four seasons, and the four stages of life are young age, youth, middle age, and old age. So the poet asks, if in the springtime of life, if in the boyhood of life, the child is treated like this, how shall this summer arise in joy? How will he be happy when he is a youth, or the fruits of summer appear? How will the fruits of learning appear? How shall we gather what griefs destroy? So, how will they gather the fruits of learning? How will they gather the fruits of education? And griefs have destroyed all the joys. And the poet asks, how will the child bless the mellowing year? The mellow season is autumn. So, how will the middle age of the person, of the child, how will the middle age, how will the child be in middle age? It will be sad, it will be melancholy. And even when the blasts of winter, when the white hair appears, uh, and when the person is old, the he will be very weighed down with sorrow because his foundation of life, his boyhood, his childhood, has been very dismal and very gloomy and very sad and full of sorrow. So, from this poem, we learn that as far as possible, the child should be subjected to methods of instruction which are which make learning uh, a happy experience rather than methods of punishment intended to bring about uh, learning forcefully. So, but at the same time, it should be remembered that too much pampering, too much mollycoddling, too much, you know, too much, uh, too little discipline may have a negative effect. So, methods of discipline and methods of instruction, which make the child happy, should be used with due care. That is what we learn from this poem. So, in the next poem, we learn about the aspect of money, which plays so important a part in people's lives. So, in the next poem, which is called Money Madness by the poet D.H. Lawrence, we learn the effects of money on a person. So, here we have the poem Money Madness by David Herbert Lawrence, who was an English author. He's written this poem about the effects of money on a person. So here he says, money is our madness, our vast collective madness. So money is our madness. Our madness means my madness and your madness and everybody else's madness. So everybody on earth is mad about money. Uh, and it's a collective madness. Collectively, together, we are mad about money. Uh, and of course, if the multitude is mad, the individual carries his own small brain of insanity around with him. So the poet says that if the multitude, if the many, all the people are mad about money, then each individual will carry his own small grain of madness or insanity around with him about money. Wherever he goes, he'll think about money, he'll look at everything from a monetary aspect, from an economic point of view, and this has its own good reason. Because, according to one thinker, ancient man traded and bartered and bought and sold goods in ancient times. And whenever a loan was given by a person to another, the borrower, if he could not repay the loan, was treated very cruelly by the person who had lent him money. The lender would have every right to strip off uh, an equivalent amount of flesh. The borrower, if he could not repay the money, would be subjected to horrific forms of torture. So, this aspect of man's psyche has come down to us to modern times. So, everybody views money with a certain amount of caution. If, if, and in fact, it goes so far as to tinge all our life, all our experiences in daily life are tinged with the aspect of money because because of this part of our mind which is handed down to us from ancient times. Because our ancestors traded and treated each other cruelly over the issue of money, we also do so. So the poet says, I doubt if any man living hands out a pound note without a pang. So the poet says, any living man will lend a small amount of money like a pound with a feeling of physical pain. He experiences physical pain when he hands out a pound note. Uh, a pang is a physical pain, and real tremor if he hands out a 10-pound note. And if he hands out a larger sum of money, like a 10-pound note, that's around 1,000 rupees in Indian currency, he will experience real tremor. His hands will start to tremble and he'll feel weak. So, the poet continues, we quail, money makes us quail. Quail means we grovel and we feel discouraged whenever we think about money. and the poet says, it has got us down. We grovel before it in strange terror. So it has got us down means it has given us a feeling of discouragement, and before the issue of money, we bend down in strange terror or fear. And no wonder, for money has a fearful, cruel power among men. So the poet says that has, the issue of money has fearful, scary, cruel power among men. But it is not money we're so afraid of. It is the vast collective money madness of mankind. So the poet says it's not exactly the currency we're afraid of, not exactly the 100 rupee note or the 200 rupee note or the 500 rupee note that we're afraid of. What we're afraid of is collective money madness of mankind. So everyone on earth views money with fear and discouragement. So everyone is collectively mad about money. They never feel secure when the issue of money is mentioned. So that makes them behave very cruelly towards each other. For mankind says with one voice, how much is he worth? So the whole of mankind views each other from one point of view, that is the worth of the individual. How much money does he have? And has he no money, then let him eat dirt and go cold. If a person has no money, then let him eat dirt, let him eat mud, and let him stay out in the open, be exposed to the elements, and let him go cold. And if I have no money, they will give me a little bread so I do not die. So if a person has no money, then others will be sympathetic towards him and give him a little bread so that he doesn't starve to death. But they'll make me eat dirt with it. But they will scold him and they may even beat him if he doesn't have money. I shall have to eat dirt, I shall have to eat dirt if I have no money. It is that I am frightened of. So the person who is poor will have to be subjected to all sorts of cruelty, and that if he has no money, and that is what the person is afraid of. It is a collective money madness of mankind, and that fear can become a delirium. So if a person has no money, then the thought of having no money, how to get some money, will go round and round in his mind until it becomes all muddled and it will become delirious. So he'll go into delirium. He won't be able to think clearly if he doesn't have money. It is fear of my money mad fellow men. So the basis of this is the fear that the person feels about the issue of money. We must have some money to save us from eating dirt. So the poet says we must have some money to save us from eating dirt, to be scolded or maybe even beaten by others. So all this is a good reason. Why did ancient man treat the borrower with such cruelty? It's because the execution of cruelty on the borrower gave to the mind of the lender the keenest sense of pleasure. So, this sense of pleasure that the lender felt when he treated the borrower cruelty is a basis of why uh, people treat each other like that when over the issue of money. But at the same time, yet another thinker says that the poor person is not so dirty, is not so cold and hungry. That is, a poor person is not hungry, is not cold, as he is dirty and ragged and gross. So he doesn't wash himself, he doesn't wear clean clothes, and he doesn't live in congenial surrounding. Maybe he lives in squalor, but whatever it may be, this other thinker says, that is Henry David Thoreau says, The poor person is not so cold and hungry, is not cold and hungry as he is dirty and ragged and rough. So, at any rate, whatever it is, the issue of money uh, instills a sense of fear in everybody, and if anybody sees cruelty being inflicted on another, it is because of the sense of pleasure that is given by the infliction of the cruelty. But here in the poem, the poet brings out um, an ideal uh, result, what should be an ideal result of having no money. The poet says, this is all wrong. Bread should be free, shelter should be free, fire should be free to all and anybody, all over the world. So, so the poet says the three basic necessities of bread, shelter, and fire, fuel, should be free to everybody all over the world. So if we don't have bread, we can't live for 22 days. That's what the scientific finding says. If we don't have shelter, we'll very quickly be nipped in the bud. Our life will be very quickly nipped in the bud. We'll die very quickly if we're exposed to the elements. And fire, that is fuel, is necessary to keep us warm and to cook our food and so on and so forth. So, why are these three basic necessities necessary? Why are they called the three basic necessities? Because the grand necessity for a person is to keep warm. So, bread gives him food, um, food allows him to generate warmth from within. Clothing enables him to keep warm as far as skin is concerned, and shelter also enables the person to stay warm. So the three basic necessities are they're called necessities because the ultimate reason is that the grand necessity is to keep warm for a person. So the poet says, bread, shelter, and fire should be free to all and anybody, all over the world. We must regain our sanity about money before we start killing one another about it. So the poet says either people start sharing bread, shelter, and fire freely, otherwise, those who don't have, the majority of people who don't have bread, the majority of people who are exposed to the elements, they'll start to rebel and the killing will take place over the issue of the three personalities. So the poet says, unless we regain our sanity and share bread and fuel and clothing and shelter and so on, if we don't regain our sanity over these things, we start killing one another about it. One thing or the other. Either we share or we kill each other over it. So that is a poem, Money Madness, about the issue of money. And so finally we come to the last lesson in the first Spirit book, which is a poem about love. So just as money is one of the great influences of life, the other great influencer of life is love. So what does the poet say about love? We'll come to the last poem in the textbook, which is called Do Not Ask of Me, My Love, and it is by the poet Faiz Ahmad Faiz. So, here in this poem, the poet says that, okay, we'll come to the poem in a minute. So, here we are at the poem Do Not Ask of Me, My Love. So, in the title, we can see that the poet is asking his love, his beloved, not to ask of him something that he has. He had given her, but now he cannot give it. So the poet says, do not ask of me, my love. He addresses his beloved as my love. So this is why the poet fires him with praise. So we'll read the poem. It says, do not ask of me, my love, that love I once had for you. So the poet says to the beloved not to ask of him the love he once had for her. That is, once when he was much younger, he felt an intense passion, he felt an intense desire, he felt an intense longing for the beloved, and those were the days when his instincts were strong, when he was young and strong, and he was physically very active. So, during his youth, he felt a strong sense of attraction towards the beloved. But now that he's grown older and his energy has been sapped, his unconscious has been sapped of its energy, he asks her not to ask of him the same passion that he felt for her when he was younger. Because now that he's past middle age, all his physiology and even his psychology has been sapped of his strength. His mind, which was once strong and able to think clearly and powerfully about so many issues and so many things, has now become very soft. And even his physiology, his body has become soft. So the poet says, do not ask of me, my love, that love I once had for you. And the poet describes this youth of his, and he says, there was a time when life was bright and blooming, and your sorrow was much more than any other pain. So to the poet, the beloved was center of his life, and he said, there was a time, was is in the past tense. So there was a time when life was bright and young and blooming. Life was as fair as a flower, blooming flower, flower bloom. And the poet says that if the beloved felt any sorrow, it was unbearable to him because her sorrow, whether small or not so small, was much greater than any other pain that he could have felt. Your beauty gave the spring everlasting youth. So the beauty of the beloved gave even the spring season everlasting youth. The poet felt that this time of life would last throughout for eternity, and he used to lose himself in the sight of the beloved, and he says to her, your eyes, yes, your eyes were everything, all else was vain. So the poet used to be lost in gazing into his beloved's eyes. They were everything. They used to absorb him, and he used to forget himself. He used to forget his surroundings. He used to forget his. Uh, uh, he used to forget himself when he was with her. So it was like he had become a being of spirit, a loving being of spirit, and he used to blend himself in the beloved. And this feeling of love uh, tinged everything with a great deal of pleasure. So the poet says, while you were with me, I thought the world was mine. So the poet says that while the beloved was with him, the whole he belonged, the whole world was his. He was king of the world, so to speak. Though now I know it was an illusion. So now that he's become older, he knows that that feeling was illusory. It was not real. That he ruled the world. That he was mightier than everyone. All those things were illusory, but that's the way I imagined it to be. So he imagined it that he could uh, be a king. And in fact, that feeling is to a great extent true because when we're young, we commonly look upward. So, in the words of a third thinker, that is Carl Gustav Jung, he says that our life is like a parabola. So, an inverted parabola. So, when we're young and up to middle age, we are ascending the side of the parabola. We look to the future, we have certain goals, we have certain desires, and we have certain aims to be achieved in life. We look to the future, but once middle age is attained, we begin to slide down on the other side. That is, all our strength has been leaves us. Most of our strength has left us after we pass middle age, and we slide down towards the final resting place, which is the grave, on the other side of the parabola. So, uh, uh, so, and the poet says that he imagines that he could rule the world, and in fact, maybe he did make his mark upon it through his efforts, through his desires, through his motivations, through his aptitudes, through his interests. He did make a mark upon the world, and but now he says, you know, that rosy aspect of life has left him, and he says, for there are other sorrows in the world than thou, and other pleasures too. So he describes love as one of the sorrows of the world. Why does he describe love as one of the sorrows of the world? Because uh, in there is a saying that all love is sad, but sad as it is the best thing that we know. So love is bittersweet, bittersweet chocolate. So there are other sorrows in the world than love, and there are also other pleasures. So in the last three stanzas of the poem, next two stanzas of the poet describes these things which the other things which are there in the world. He repeats the chorus: "Do not ask of me, my love, that love I once had for you." And he says, woven in silk and satin and brocade, those dark and brutal corpses of countless centuries, bodies bathed in blood, smeared with dust, sold from marketplace to marketplace, bodies risen from the cauldron of diseases, pus dripping from their festering sores. My eyes must also turn to these. So, what are the other sorrows in the world? And the poet says there are dark and brutal, cruel curses of countless centuries. So, for countless centuries, these curses have bedeviled mankind, and they are bodies bathed in blood. So, in wartime, in hospitals, and because of poverty, bodies are bathed in blood and smeared or rubbed with dust. And there is slavery seen, people being treated like cattle, and they're sold from marketplace to marketplace, like cows and goats and sheep. And in the hospitals, he sees the bodies risen from the cauldron, a huge vessel of disease. Each body is a vessel of many diseases. And pus is dripping from the sores of the diseased persons. And he says, now that the rosy aspect of life cannot be recalled, his eyes must also turn to the darker aspects of life that are present in society. So he asks, he tells his love, maybe it's a final goodbye, maybe it's not, maybe he remembers, maybe it will help him, the recollection of the beautiful aspect of love that he felt when he was a child, when he was younger. And he tells his beloved, "You're beautiful still, my love, but I am helpless too." And so he says, the beauty of the beloved has not come down. She is still as attractive, as beautiful as ever. But he says that he is helpless. He cannot willfully command his love to come and go. He cannot willfully, it's not in his power to feel love. So he says that he is helpless. And he says, there are other sorrows in the world than love, and other pleasures too. And he repeats the refrain of the poem, that is, he asks his beloved not to insist that he should love her as passionately as he did when he was younger. And he says, "Do not ask of me, my love, that love I once had for you." So these are the three aspects of life which are found in the first PU English textbook of Karnataka State. That is reflections. Uh, so here we see that we learn a lot about life from literature. So thank you.